Hi everybody, and welcome to a quick overview of ProBuilder. This is version 2.2, current as of December 20th, 2013, so we are constantly updating and enhancing this tool, so make sure just by dropping by protoolsforunity3d.com, make sure that you have the latest info and video here, always lots that we're adding on. This particular release is especially exciting for us because we've been working directly with the awesome folks over at Pixelbeam who are creating Storm United, a great AAA game, FPS game for Unity, and they're using ProBuilder. It's a big part of their level design efforts, and we've been able to work with them directly to make ProBuilder even better, and we'll continue to do that in the future. Just a quick intro for those who might be new to ProBuilder in Unity. This is a tool that allows you to very quickly and simply build up geometry, texture it, edit it, do the UVs, all of that right within Unity itself. So there's no need to jump between other editing programs. And this is great especially for level design, also for any other kind of props or objects, but really does lend itself especially well to level design. So let's dive in and take a look at how this works. Essentially, ProBuilder has three modes that you're always in, one of those three, either top level mode or object editing mode. And that's just basic Unity working. You can move things around, rotate, scale, etc. Nothing special. Then you have the geometry level mode, which we now in 2.2 have this handy little toolbar up top. You can click directly on that to switch between geometry, texture, and top level mode. Or you can just use G on your keyboard to toggle in or out of geometry, or J to toggle in and out of texture mode. You can also use escape on the keyboard to jump right back to top level mode. So let's jump into geometry. Here you have three different modes inside of this. You have vertex editing mode, where you can edit any of the individual vertices. You can drag select them. You can hold shift and deselect items or add to the selection. Let's just change this coordinate handle up here. You might have noticed that the handle is pointing in an odd direction. That's because one other thing here, you can also set the coordinate handle. As you're seeing there, it can go off of the plane in the local to the object direction or global. I'll leave that on global for the rest of this tutorial just to make a little more sense. So again, you can select vertices very simply, and then of course move them, scale them, and rotate them. If you click on any face, it will automatically select all the vertices on that face. New in ProBuilder 2.2, you can also collapse vertices. So for example, if I move these down and wanted to create a triangle at the bottom, I can drop them right down and just hit Alt-C to collapse and do the same over here. If I wanted to collapse these without moving them together, that will work just the same. Select them and hit Alt-C, and it pulls them together at the center point. You might notice also, side note, I'm using ProGrid at the moment. This is an awesome tool to also use with ProBuilder and anything in Unity really. It gives you a full grid snapping system that is world-based. So instead of holding control and moving things, that can then become off the grid. Using ProGrids, everything is always snapped to a world grid, and you can set the exact size of it, whether it's in meters, feet, etc. All sorts of handy things with that. So another tool to look at, especially if you're looking into ProBuilder or Prototype. Moving on, if you hit H, you can toggle to the next edit mode, and this is the edge editing mode. In edge mode, just like the other modes, you can click to select any edge, or hold shift to select multiple. You can also drag select multiple edges. If you click on a face, again it will select all of the edges on that face, and you can hold shift to select multiple in the same way. One thing to mention, the edge mode is currently still in beta, but we just really wanted to get this out to everyone because it's so useful. So if you find any issues, please do let us know. Just be aware that certain things aren't quite perfect with this, but it's still extremely handy. So moving on from edge mode, if you hit H once more, you move into face mode, and now we can click and select entire faces at once. So very straightforward. You can select the faces and of course move them, rotate, and scale just like in vertex and edge mode, and drag selection or holding shift where it works exactly the same as well. For a bit of a real-world demonstration, let's say we wanted to fix this area here, but we've done too many different actions at the moment to just use Control-Z for that vertex collapsing. So what I can do is simply select these faces, hit backspace to delete them, and one thing worth mentioning, I can also delete those faces from vertex mode. I can simply select the face, delete, or from edge mode, or again from face mode. So we like to leave things as open as we possibly can to doing however works best for your style. So once we've deleted those faces, of course there's still one on the bottom here. It's just back face culling, means you can't see it. Let's move to edge mode and select this edge down here on the bottom. Even better, I'll select all three of the edges around the outside. Then I can hold Shift and extrude it up. Select just the ones on the top and hit Alt-B to bridge across those edges. One thing is that if I move this, we can see that these aren't connected. So I'll move to vertex mode and collapse those vertices down. Now they're connected properly. If for any reason you wanted to re-break those vertices, you can select them and hit Alt-X. I'll do the same over here. And now all those points are broken there, which can be useful in certain cases if you need to break up geometry in a specific manner. Of course, we can just put those right back together with the collapse function. So the edge bridging, edge selection itself entirely, the vertex collapsing and vertex splitting are a couple of the brand new tools, but probably the best one that we have to add here really is extrusion, which you saw just a little bit of just a moment ago with the edges. So again, with edges, you can select them as many as you want and simply very quickly extrude and build complex objects in very little time, and then bridge between them to create even more complex geometry very quickly. So that's one use for extrude, and probably I would say the best use for it, really. However, you can also use that both in vertex mode and face mode. So if I switch to editing faces, I can select any face and just hold Shift, the same as in edge mode. And we really try to keep things very similar and very intuitive and simple as we're working with this. So just hold Shift and I can extrude it just like so. I can also switch to the scaling mode and now instantly scale it down and work just like that. So the scale will automatically extrude while I'm holding Shift. The same works for the extrude function when using the rotate tool. Hold Shift and rotate. So as you can see, very simple to quickly create complex geometry, and I can do this just the same in vertex mode. Just hold Shift and move it out as long as I have a vertex selected. And just a quick note here, since I'm using ProGrids, I know absolutely for a fact that all of these are connected perfectly. Just one more reason, you should definitely check out that tool. Very, very handy if you want to build anything exactly onto a grid and make sure things are lining up properly so there's no light leaks. Moving on to the next major area of ProBuilder, you've probably noticed that all these textures are basically taking care of themselves, or the UVs that is. You don't have to do any work on your own, but you can if you do want to manually fix this up or do something special to it. In this case, the area we have over here doesn't have any textures on it, and this is something again in 2.2 to do with edges that will be fixed up in a later update for sure. But as it is, it gives us a good opportunity to take a quick look at how the texturing tool works. So I'm going to hit J to toggle into the texture mode, or again you could click on the bar up top where it says texture. And from here we get the texture tools panel, and we won't go over all of the options in here, but just the basics to make sure you have a good grasp of how this works. First of all, you can choose a material that's going to be queued that you can paint instantly just by clicking on the material browser here. And I have the Sci-Fi Pack by Michael O. I'm using at the moment some very, very cool textures and detail assets in this pack. And we'll pick something that looks fairly nice, maybe just this one here. With that selected in the quick paint area there, I can just hold Control Shift and then left click on any face to instantly paint it on. So I could select some other ones and do the same here. If your textures aren't fitting just right, you can edit those as well. So we'll turn on the highlight option with a checkbox here, so I can see the face I have selected. And now, simply using the standard Unity controls, I can move this texture around. Just the same, I can scale it and also rotate it. So again, this is something that we really try for with ProBuilder, is to make everything just make sense and be absolutely intuitive, what you'd expect it to do. I click on the face and then move it around. The Texture Tools panel also includes an option for smoothing faces, so if you have any areas where you need to make them appear smooth but you don't want to add lots of extra polys, this is a great way to add to the smoothing, the smooth look of any selection of faces. I'll go ahead and exit texture mode, and we'll start moving on down the GUI a little quicker now, since that's basically the core of ProBuilder, all the geometry construction and texturing, but there's lots more that it can do. So number one, we have the Create New Shape button. By clicking on this, you can open up the Shape Tool panel, and this allows you to create all sorts of different shapes without having to build them from the ground up. So we've got lots of options in here: stair, prism, cylinder, plane, door, etc. All sorts of different items. Just take a look at one of the most useful options, the stair item. You can set the number of steps, the width, height, depth, whether it's just the platforms or if it builds the sides and the back. All sorts of great options within this. And each of the other items are very much the same. You can set plenty of variables to build exactly what you need without having to build it piece by piece. It saves lots of time and trouble. Moving down the GUI panel, the next button is the Merge tool, and this will allow you to take multiple items. For example, I'll create a cube or two here. And let's say I might as well merge these into each other. They don't need to be separate items and creating separate draw calls. Select both of them and hit the Merge button, and it gives me the option to merge delete, so the originals will not be saved, or merge saved, which means the originals will be saved in the hierarchy but just deactivated, or just cancel it, of course. So if I hit merge delete, these two are now merged down into one single mesh object. Of course, you can still edit it exactly like any other ProBuilder or prototype object. No difference at all. So that's a great option for optimizing your scenes. We'll delete that. Below that is the grouping tool. This allows you just to quickly group objects together. So if I have extra items, I'll take both of these, since it's what I have here, and just click on the group button, and it quickly drops them into a group within the hierarchy. So this is a handy way to keep things a bit more organized. However, we definitely recommend that you actually check out the new Pro Groups tool that we just released. This allows you to group objects without messing with your hierarchy at all. Very nice, something, it's much like selection sets in 3D Max and Maya and so forth, where you can have any item in as many groups as you want, and it does not modify the item at all. You can toggle visibility on and off, as well as freeze them or select objects. It's just a great tool to organize your scene with. So anyway, that is the group tool, and I can just drag them back out of that group if I want, and delete the parent item. Below the group tool is the light mapping settings. This gives you very fine-tuned control over exactly how your light maps are generated when using ProBuilder. And it's something that you'll definitely want to look up a bit before you start messing with the values. They're set to be generally just right, but there might be cases where you need to change these a bit. If in any case you do set them to something that isn't working, you can reset the values to default and then apply them to all the objects in your scene if you need to. Below that is just a button for extrude, and this gives you a slightly different method of extrusion. For example, if I select a face here, instead of using the shift method, I can also just click on the button and it automatically extrudes it a certain amount. You can also hit Control E on your keyboard to do the same thing, or Control Shift E will extrude, but it doesn't actually move it at all. If I now move this, you can see that it did actually extrude it slightly. Next in line is the mirror tool, and this allows you to create exactly mirrored copies of objects. Below that is the face normal, so you can flip the normals on entire objects. So if I select this, click that, it's instantly inverted. This can be useful for creating interiors quickly. You can also use it on individual faces. So if I select a few faces here, I can invert just those faces, and I'll do the same on the other side so we can see through there. Just like that. So useful for certain situations, probably mostly interior items. Below the flip tool, the normal flip tool, is the set pivot. This is also extremely handy. Let's undo those normal settings. Okay, so with the set pivot tool, let's say I wanted this object to pivot exactly around the vertex right down here. I can enter edit mode, move to vertex, select that vertex, and hit Control J on the keyboard or click directly on the set pivot button. And now the pivot is set right there. So very useful when you need something to move in an exact manner. You can also use it simply by selecting any number of vertices or faces or edges, and the set pivot tool will set the pivot to the exact center of whatever you have selected. Last, for the buttons in the panel here, is the vertex coloring or colorizer panel. So as long as I am in a mode where I can select faces, I'll move right to the face mode here, but you can do it in vertex or edge mode. Whenever I click on a face, I can go ahead and set a color directly to it, as long as the material supports any kind of vertex coloring. In this case, these fancy materials here from Michael Pack don't support vertex coloring. That's fine. I'll just use the default material that we have on the generic ProBuilder object here. So if I select a face, or multiple, doesn't matter, and then just click on a color, it instantly applies that color to the face. This can be very handy for quickly blocking out levels if you need to add, very simply red and blue side or something like that. Very useful for that, and it doesn't add any draw calls. It's just right in the vertex color itself. Of course, you can choose any of the colors here to set as you like, and it will remember it between Unity sessions, so it's not going to lose the colors you set when you restart Unity. We also have the Viz Groups toggles here, and I'll just close the ProGrids panel for a moment. I think with the screen recording I can't quite show all of that, but now we have it here. And these are covered in other tutorials more in depth, but essentially in ProBuilder you can create not just one type of object, but multiple types that all have different functions. For example, if I had this object here, and I knew it was only ever going to be a fairly complex item and not necessarily blocking the player's view a lot, I don't want it to become part of the occlusion, because that's actually most likely going to actually hurt the performance more than it will help. So that's why all ProBuilder objects are by default this detail type. So if I toggle this off, you can see it hides all of them. This is a quick way to just basically clear up your level and see what is what. So I can toggle on off the detail, world, mover, etc. Moving down these, the world type is what you would have if something was going to be part of the occlusion solution. So if I have a large wall, something obstructing the player's view quite a bit, I would definitely want to set it as a world type. So you can toggle between these or set them as world type. Just hit O for occluder essentially. And if I select an object and hit B, that'll turn it into a detail. This derives from back in the day when you had detail brushes. If anyone remembers back in Hammer and other BSP type editing tools. So we also have the mover type. This is going to be used if the object should not be light mapped. This will make sure it's a dynamic object. Otherwise, by default, all ProBuilder objects are static and will be light mapped and batched. Then we have the collision and trigger types. These are a bit more complex, but extremely useful. If I create, let's say, just a generic item and set it up, just a box here, and maybe this is going to block the player from falling off the edge. But I don't want it to be seen in the game. I can just hit C with it selected and it turns into a collider type. And this will automatically hide itself but retain the collision element when you enter the game. It's also very simple to toggle their visibility on and off within the editor. Very similar, you can also create a trigger just by hitting T. And this is the same thing, except instead of a essentially physical collider, it's now just a on-trigger collider. So very useful for placing in front of doors, over top of spike traps, fun things like that. So anything the player is going to go into, and then you have your script on it that has an on-trigger enter or exit, and then it will call that script. So this itself doesn't do anything in the game other than allows you to quickly and easily set up these exactly where you need them. And you can use all the same extrude and editing methods on these if you really need to get an exact setup for a trigger. So very, very simple. If you have, death volumes or spawn volumes, post processing, anything like that. Very simple to add in with these. Last in line is the no draw type, and the no draw is a special element that can be used for specialized optimization where you need a certain face to block light but not to be included in the light map, so it's not using up texture space, and not to be rendered at all in the game either. So this, if you select any face in texture editing mode, or multiple faces, and actually I'll just select all of these out here, just click on the material selection and choose the no draw, and then apply that. Or you can simply hit N on the keyboard and it becomes no draw. So what happens with this is I can obviously turn it on and off in the editor, and it'll also never be shown in play mode. But it does have the added benefit versus just deleting the face of it will block light entirely, but again not at all be included in the light map. So it's not going to be using up your texture space. So you want to use this in areas that you just want to be absolutely certain there is no light leak. So that's basically it for a quick-ish overview of ProBuilder. Again, version 2.2. Double check that you have the absolute latest version. We're always updating that. Pro Tools for Unity3D.com. Of course, there are lots of extra tools and options right within the window item here. Make sure you check through these, as well as look at the online documentation. There's lots of extras that we add in. And one last thing I'd like to really make sure everyone is aware of, you can change all of these shortcuts and lots of preferences. Just go to Edit, Preferences, and then click on the super handy ProBuilder tab here. And we have tons of preferences you can set up, and again you can customize all of the shortcut keys so that you can make ProBuilder work exactly as you need it to, depending on your keyboard layout and whatnot. So enjoy that, make sure you use it, and that's really it for the quick ProBuilder preview here. We're really looking forward to everything that people will be creating with this. Please do show us if you end up creating some very cool content, and as the same, if you find any bugs or anything like that, we'll get right on it and fix anything that comes up. And we're always adding new features and tools, so we also definitely suggest that you either follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/ProBuilder3D, the same for twitter.com/ProBuilder3D, or sign up for the newsletter by going to our website. Again, that's procore3d.com. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the future videos.